Salafalava and welcome to the ReadswithRosa podcast. Today's guest is a storyteller. She has previously worked in libraries with preschool story time and has translated some Tongan language picture books. She has served her Te Awa Kairangi community in many ways through health and well-being initiatives for Pasifika, as well as supporting rangatahi in our rainbow communities. Aside from being a mum, we can now add published author to her name with the recent launch of her debut poetry collection, Tui Pea Luva. It is my honor to welcome to the show Tongan author Mele Tonga-Grant. Woohoo! Welcome, sis. Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
How are you?
I'm so good. Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to finally be doing this. I know you've been super, super busy, but it's an honor and a privilege just to have you here to share your story and, of course, to put your book gem, your debut poetry collection on blast, just for everyone to know. So, yeah, before we get started, I like to ask our guests just to shout out their communities or their villages before we begin.
Awesome. So malolele ko kuinga ko Mele Tonga-Grant. Ako lele mai ku whae pe me niwa whao mo tataka mo Tonga pe ko e kuta mai me whamotu. And I am born and bred here in Lower Hutt, Wellington in New Zealand.
Woof, woof. Shout out. Hey, if you're listening, if you're tuning in, Lower Hat is in the house, fam. That's what's up. Awesome. It's great to have you here. Man, where do we begin, Mele? I don't know. Where do we begin? Writing journey, like where does it begin for you? Is it something that you've always just done, like writing here and there? Is it something you've recently taken to? Yeah.
Yeah, so I never really took myself as a writer, but I've always did really well in English. Creative writing was one of those things where they're like, "You're really good at this," and I'm like, "Yeah, okay," but never really thought that it was a thing for me in terms of putting out like a book. I never thought that getting to this point was, it wasn't something that crossed my mind ever. For me, writing was something that I would do for myself, like as an outlet, as a way to capture things, but it was more just an internal thing for me. And so then when it was, I was approached to say, like, do you want to write something? I'm like, no. No, why would I do that? But I've always had a love for words and a love for language. And this past couple of weeks, I've been reflecting on, like, how did I get into writing, and beyond just like writing because I had to. When was I writing because it was something that filled my cup or something that I found joyful? And I was thinking about when I was a teenager, like, our parents are strict, and you get in trouble and you want to say all these things to them, but you can't because you love and respect them. And it's just so not, you don't go back and you tell them, actually, this is how I feel. So I used to write these, like, pretend stories about other people and their, like, I guess, outlook on the world, but it was me. And so I remember when my mum read it, she was like, "What the heck is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just, just some creative writing and not like that. I feel like that's my life." But yeah, it was like looking at different times when I've done that. Like, as a kid, we like wrote songs with my brothers and would just write random things, but it wasn't anything you'd think would be put out there. But I'm reminded that I come from a family of orators and storytellers who, because of where we come from, one of their big, like in our village, one of their things that they're known for are their compositions. And so for me, it's like, oh, actually, it makes sense that I do something like this because it's something that our families do. And when you have like your chiefs who speak on behalf of your families, but it's not just plain and simple, like Matai have their own way of
Mm.
expressing, and they use like heliaki or metaphors in different ways. And so for me, it's like, oh, actually, in reflection, it's always been a part of who I am, but nothing, like nothing told me this is something that you can do. Like in school, we
Mm.
study other people writing, Palangi people writing about us, about where we came from, our histories. But then the more I delve into it, actually, I've already known my history, where I come from, and have the ability to tell our stories as well. But yeah.
Mm. I love that. Yes. Yes. That's it. Exactly. Like, why should other people write our stories? You just needed something, motivation or something to inspire and to tap into the talent, the skills that were already there, that love and passion that you have for writing.
Yeah, well, Dahlia, literally, it wasn't even like the very first time I met her, and we tell this story often, is
Mm.
she came into the library and they had just launched um, the Pacific Navigators book.
Mm.
And so we were just met her for the first time and just talking a little bit about what we were doing. And she goes, "You're going to write a book." And I laughed at her. And, you know, and at the time I was pregnant with my youngest. So it'd
Mm.
been about 4 years ago now. And she's like, "Yeah, you're going to write a book." I'm like, "Who is this lady and who let her in the library?" But
Mm.
really thankful for people like that who are persistent in their vision, and also like their belief and hopes for other people to be able to share about who they are as well.
Mm. I mean, congratulations on your
Thank
book launch that
you.
happened a few days ago, this past
Thank you.
weekend. I mean, I was looking at all the photos. I was like, man, it just looked like just that whole whānau, like kainga, like, just such a family celebration, um, honoring your folks, your people, your villages.
Yeah,
And yeah.
it was so cool. Because we didn't really know what to expect. Had an idea, but not to what extent that it would kind of just have a life of its own. Because like family turned up, and obviously they're all trying to celebrate me, and I'm just like, why? Like, I'm just real shy about I guess being the person put up front, because usually I'm doing stuff in the background, running around, being given jobs
Mm.
to do. And so then one of my aunties who features in the book, she turns up, and because they had a graduation that they were at early in the day, she's like, "How do I look?" I said, "Oh, Mama, you look really beautiful.
Mm.
Come and sit in the front." She goes, "Oh no, I'm getting changed," and she's got this bag, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, there are changing rooms over there." And I thought she turned up, she looked good. And then she goes into this changing room, comes out, and she's wearing like this bright, sparkly, like sequin dress. And I was like, "Who let this lady in here?" But everyone was just laughing, because they were like, "I know exactly who that is in the book," because you
Mm.
can see like the different characters. And um one of the people who have never met my family before, or my mamas or whatever, they're like, "It's like I've just seen the book come to life."
Mm.
We were already excited and really loved the poems that we'd read already. So some of the received their books before the launch. And so when they turned up and then saw these, like the way that all of these women interacted, and really watching the room, they're like, "Oh my goodness," it's like, yes, this is exactly it. And I see what you were talking about, which is really cool as well to hear. Yeah.
Man. For those who are tuning in, if you're listening, if you are watching via YouTube, so Tui Pea Luva, it's a poetry collection recently launched by yours truly, author Mele Tonga-Grant. It features 48 original poems inspired by 8 women, some of who she has mentioned already. I'm getting excited. I cannot wait to get my own copy and read. It captures the essence of Tongan culture and life lessons passed through generations. Each poem is a delicate weaving of wisdom, a celebration of the timeless bond of family, the beauty of female resilience. Yes. and a tribute to its endearing legacy. I mean, how did you even? So, okay, so now you're going to write a book. Let's backtrack a little bit. We're already at the poetry collection launch. I'm excited, but let's backtrack. So, you're going to write a book. How do you even begin? How do the ideas start coming to you? Or are you one of those people like, for the longest time, you've kept something right there, but just really never thought of developing it?
No, well, I didn't. So this is all new.
Mm.
Everything that's in this collection had been written specifically for this collection, or bar maybe 2 or 3 of them. But when we, like, literally this time last year, we came together to brainstorm. What is it that you want to be writing about? What's your idea? What's your concept? And so for me, what I really wanted to do was have something for my daughter that was the end goal, was anything for her that I can pass on to her brothers, and for them to feel like they see themselves in the work. And so one of the things that I'd been thinking about, we've been doing a lot of craft with my mum and my aunties. They meet regularly. They do like tapa making or different crafts. And so I've been thinking about, how do I tell the story of who they are in a different way, weaving some of the craft that I learned. And so in the series, there's like 3 different parts. There's Dolly, which is picking. And so for me, it was like, oh, how do I pick these flowers to put together a flower garland? And for that's you're literally wearing your whakapapa, your pepeha, on your body, and so, and as an outward expression of who you are. And so for me was, how do I pick all these different beautiful flowers, and who would they be, and starting to weave that together as the second part, which is Tui, is the weaving part, and bringing what I've learned from those people and bringing it into who I am. And then Luva is to gift. And so that was then, how do I bring what I've picked up from other people, seeing it in my life and us together, and then what that looks like in my own life through service, through being a mom, through literally anything that I do. How is it that what I've picked up from them, I'm now gifting, and then what does that mean for my daughter to then gift that on and add to it as well? And so, yeah, the end goal was something for my kids, but more than that is holding on to kind of the things that I've learned and picked up along the way from all these different women, the things that make us strong, the things that we're celebrated for, but actually also the things that nobody sees. Some of what I've shared are things that only happen between, that person and I, or I've only seen through observing, but no one talks about because we're just so busy being busy, so busy serving, so busy being moms and all those other things, that actually we forget that in those moments, not just the beautiful outcomes or things that the end that we celebrate, but in the midst of that craziness, there is beauty as well. So I really wanted to find a way to capture that.
And how do you find the words to capture that without getting caught in your emotions and just the memories and the, like, you want to do it justice, right? You want
Yeah,
to make sure you're absolutely honoring these women who have played just such a huge part in your life. So, man, wow, it must have been hard to
yeah.
find the
And
right words.
some of them I wrote like on a flight on the way to somewhere. But usually, when people ask me what's your process, like how long does it take, it was literally, I sit down and take a moment to reflect, and I just start to write based on whatever it is that I'm wanting to focus on for that person. And I don't go into it with a plan about, this is what I'm going to write about that person and this is what I'm going to write about that person. But it was more like, it kind of just happened that each of them had a different thing. And I I don't know how to explain it, but I
Mm.
don't. When I'm writing, I write based on what it sounds like, and so in my
Mm.
mind, I hear a beat or I hear a um, like a way or like a feeling or emotion, and so when it's more like a spoken thing, like an auditory thing, rather
Mm.
than just being the words. And so, cool, the words are there, and it needs to flow a specific way, but that flow needs to also mirror that person or the thing that I'm talking about. And then I go through and do an edit and change words or um, yeah, some of that stuff where you're just like, oh, should I put that in there or is she going to get mad?
Mm.
But yeah, so I often hear like, I write based on like the sound of the syllables or how,
Mm.
but there isn't like a real, oh, some poems they have structure like
Mm.
this many beats in this line and this many in the next and then this, yeah, but it's not connected to any of that technical stuff at
Right.
all. It was more just fueled by emotion and, um, yeah, like what I hope that they know that I see in them as well.
Mm. And then you finally, at the book launch, you got to read in
Yes,
public, and I mean, that must have been overwhelming.
it was overwhelming, um, but actually, like, I thought it was a really good opportunity to um, read it in the way that I heard it for the
Mm.
people that they were written for. And so some of the ones that I shared with ones for people that were specifically in the room. Um, and so when I looked up and I see these people crying, and I'm like, oh
Oh.
my gosh, like, yes, I cried writing this, but I didn't. Um, you can only hope what people's reactions to
Mm.
your writing would be, but to see it live, yeah, it was really beautiful. But also for people to give feedback as well about
Mm.
how they felt, what parts they weren't sure about. But yeah, it was really cool to actually have that live interaction of this is the first time that they're seeing or hearing some of the poems,
Mm.
and then like getting a reaction or because if you write and it just sits there, like there's kind of no purpose behind it.
Mm.
They're just words on a piece of paper. But when you're writing and it evokes emotion or pushes people to change their mind about something, then like that's the purpose of it. Not just about capturing some essence in time, but it's also
Mm.
about how do things change or develop, or how do people feel about what it is that you're putting out there.
Mm. Is this a book that you would love to see in schools, perhaps?
Yeah, I
Like,
think so. Um, I have lots of teacher friends, and so we talk sometimes about, um, oh, this is exactly what our young people would need. And I think also links to some of the youth work that I've done is that
mm.
with that in mind is what are some of those things that the young people that of today, tomorrow, to come, what are the things that they need to remember and know and hear about themselves? Because whilst it's about these specific women, it's not just about them, it's a shared experience. And
Mm.
we want to ensure that, yeah, people in schools, because of how like volatile our environment is, because you've got everything at the tips of your fingers, and you there's no filtering system. They just get to pick up their phone, and whatever comes up in there,
Mm.
that's what they're consuming. And so making sure that there was something that young people can pick up and read, see themselves in, but also be encouraged by. And so we want them to go into schools. Well, my hope is if these books go into schools, that they get to unpack some of those things in a way that is critical,
Mm.
and not just being like receiving information and taking that as Bible, but receiving information and thinking about how that relates to their lives, but also how they can change things that we see as a clash. Because as much as we hold on to our culture as Pacific people, there are things that we have to change because we live away from home, and
Mm.
our cultures can't just stay the same way that it's done in Tonga here in New Zealand, because the reality is we live in a very different context. But how do
Mm.
we uphold those things that keep us uniquely Tongan, Samoan, Niue, and Tokelauan abroad?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. I could listen to you talk. Just keep going, sis. Keep going. I mean, I'm inspired. I'm just like, why aren't you an educator? I mean, and actually, I asked that question respectfully because I know that the work that you do in your community is that of education. You know, teaching, learning. Um, so we
No,
might need to
yeah.
meet
So, well, when I was leaving school
up.
and I was going to go and do like first year health science, and my English teacher looks at me and he's like, "What?" And I go, "What?" And he goes, "You need to be teaching." And I said, "Well, what would I teach?" And he said, "English." And I'm like, "Oh, nah, I, I don't think so." And so I went and did whatever I wanted to do, then
Mm,
actually came back and then went into um like a I was doing education. I came back to
mm,
Vic and went into education. But like life happens, brother
mm,
passed away, I spiraled, all of that stuff. And then actually gone into a space where I found while I was studying and working that I really loved working with youth, and especially those who kind of fall between the cracks or are on
mm,
the edge of like make one more wrong decision, and it could be like that moment where your life changes forever. And for me, it's wanting to work with young people who weren't being seen, felt heard, all of those things. But then, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I do find myself often in schools working, um, or in education settings or community where I'm doing adult education. And so I think, yeah, formally I'm not in that space, but
mm.
I end up in that space because um, people think I have something to say,
You do,
something useful
you
to
do.
say.
I
But
know. But the whole time you're talking, I was like, sis, come on. I mean, like, it's very inspirational. It resonates, and I can see how that would resonate with the rangatahi. So, with our young folks. So, I'm just like, and I get it because the spaces that you move in is still a form of education. It just is not the traditional, like these days. It's not only about the traditional four wall classroom. Like a classroom is many, a learning space is many, many
yeah,
settings.
and I think that's one of the things I really struggled with, like when I was learning about becoming a teacher. To become a
Mm,
teacher was like they've got the curriculum, they've got these I guess boundaries of
mhm,
when, how you teach. And what I'm trying to do is shift the way that they do that, or
mhm,
shift the way that we perceive learning as being, because um, even in the work that I'm in now, we work within a system, and I work in systems change. But actually, it is really that in education is we're telling our kids you can be whatever you want to be, and you use all your strengths, but only these ones, and those ones you only use at home. But I want people to be able to see the fluidity of like
mm,
your learning happens in all spaces, and you don't need to be stuck in these four walls, but actually do take the time to appreciate the learning that happens in that space as well, because it's different from what you're going to learn from your parents. And how do you bring those two worlds together? And I think that's probably a struggle that happens in the education system, is we're quite, I guess, there are things that we have to do because the system says we have to learn and do
mm,
things this way, but we're putting more barriers in place in doing that. And how do we actually just also give parents the tools that they need to be able to impart their own knowledge and ways of learning and ways of teaching that is just
mm.
still going to get them those same goals. So I think about like a youth space that I used to work in is we have kids who were failing in school, and yet they're producing music, they're learning technology, they're creating games. And how do we support them to be able to take what they're learning in a space that they feel comfortable in into that school system? How do we find ways to give them those marks and get them assessed to be able to say, oh, actually, yeah, you're really smart, you can do it, like that. You've got all these things that you've created that proves that you're able to do these things, but that there is something missing there. Where how do we support the system to understand the kids and the young people and their ability, and sometimes it comes down to, well, the teacher isn't equipped, or the school doesn't have the resources, or they don't feel comfortable in a setting, and so they just withdraw. But yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when you talk about walls and boundaries, because it made me think about how you were explaining your writing process, and that it wasn't the traditional structure for the stanza or whatever. It really made me think about, like, when you're in English class or when you're in class, you teach students to write a certain way, and it's like, why, there are like certain constructs. You must write this way because that is what defines success, kind of thing. And so as you're talking and we're thinking about our rangatahi, our kids, our tamariki who are out there and really trying to find a voice, whether it's through music, which is a form of poetry, writing, but they must do it this way because that's what the curriculum says. Like, we need to, like you say, there needs to be more opportunity to try different forms of storytelling, different forms of, like, yeah, like, I love hearing what you're doing. I can hear it, just your passion and heart for not just for community, but just for the youth. Like, just making sure that everyone has the same opportunity. And it's not this is the traditional route, like, so.
Yeah, and I think like sometimes it's because there's that, like, it's a misunderstanding of like different languages. So for me, it's young people have, they've got their own like swag, their own ways of communicating, and yet we're still teaching about how to communicate from like how they were doing it back in the 90s. And so it's like, how do we expect young, we forget that school was put together as it was a factory of like producing more workers, producing, I guess, the next generation of people who are going to be running the country. But we won't see anything change if we expect them to all learn the same thing, do it the
Yeah.
same way.
If classroom practice and
It
pedagogy
takes
doesn't
away,
change,
yeah.
you know. I get you. I so get you. You've done some translations for Tongan picture books, and I wanted to ask, what are some of the challenges of translating books that people just don't know about? Like, people think it's easy, right? But what are some of the challenges of that work?
One of the things that I find interesting is like when people are translating, and I guess the intent behind the translation, because there are two really different things here. You're translating word for word, or you're translating an idea, a concept, and the heart behind what is being told. And obviously, like for picture books, there's like certain ways that they're structured to support learning. It's for like scaffolding that language learning, and so that I understand. But sometimes it's like, oh, this is the word that we use now for a certain thing because it's been transliterated, or it's just like colloquial, and then it turned into that's the word that everyone uses. So like pulu, for instance, for lanu pulu for blue, but the word is lanu moana. Pulu has never existed in that space until it kind of was translated into an English. And so some of those struggles is, how do I bring what I've learned about some of our more traditional Tongan words and also merge that with what we use all the time here? And because for me is I don't want to keep sharing some of the things that or habits that I've learned that might be a bit off and not close to home, but how do I do that in a way that people feel safe, and that also there isn't a big backlash from people being like, who told you that that's the word? Or, do you know,
Yeah.
like, so that's probably one of my biggest struggles, is making sure that I uphold the languages and traditions and things that I have learned along the way, but also merge that with understanding that there are some others like me who were born and raised here in New Zealand and often are walking two different worlds and haven't figured out how they can just authentically be Tongan in whatever context that they're in, and not having to code switch or change your, like, decide, oh, which word am I going to go with, what, or what understanding do I cling to? And I guess it's that thing is all of the all of the different things that we've learned, they're all right, but it's as long as you can back it up with why you have that belief or why you use that word. Yeah, but I think that's probably one of the biggest struggle. Like, you'd think, oh yeah, it's just translating a picture book, that should be easy, but it wasn't.
And then, I mean, what's the fun part though? So there's some challenges, there's interesting things about it. What's the fun part of the work translating?
Well, the really cool thing about the books that are translated with Dahlia is that whilst we were asked to do translations for language, we were also given the opportunity to change the way that some of the pictures look, to make sure that it was reflective of each of the differences between the cultures, which is, often you just get a book that was translated into all these different languages, but nothing changes. The pictures
Right.
are the same. The pattern, they're just like, oh yeah, all of it are going to be the same because they're all islanders, so they all must have the same motifs, kind of thing.
Right.
And so that was probably one of the fun things. But also with translating, one of the really cool things that I found was I'd go into our family chat, hey guys, what's the word for this? And so then it started to have those conversations, and we're having laughs about, like a slide, like translating slide into Tongan, and you're like, what is slide? Is it silaiki? Is it? And so then hearing from my cousins who were born and raised in Tonga, and those of us here, and so then it created these safe spaces to be able to have conversations about, actually, yeah, what is the word for that, and why don't we talk about it? And let's also have a laugh about the fact that we don't know what a slide is in Tonga.
Oh, I love that. Who are some writers that inspire you, whether it's presently or just from memory, like even coming through school, maybe some authors that you really, liked?
I really love reading some of Lani Went's stuff. And because they come in, she's like written in series, and so you're just like, oh my God, yes, there's another one coming. And I think that one of the sad things is not knowing about most of these Pacific writers until I got, into uni or as a young adult or working in libraries. So, and Kalomila was another one that I really wished I had the opportunity to read in school and, have poetry that reflected me, because, like, I probably would have done more in school, because you look at poems and like, what is this? And I don't understand it because it's not the context that I live in, and I don't, who are these people that they're talking about? Like,
Mm.
what are these experiences and what are these words? But yeah, so, but I think as an adult, I have a lot more appreciation for um, old, like, ta'anga, or like compositions of old songs and poems that I've been finding and really taking the time to try and understand,
Mm.
because I think, yeah, and reading in my own language as well, which is weird because growing up I was like, why would I need Tongan? How is that going to help me? Um, and growing up in a home where we weren't allowed to speak English in the house and got a hiding for it. But then, and then, thinking, like, growing up and being like, well, why do I need to do that? Everyone else speaks Balangi, so I'm going to speak Balangi. And then becoming an adult and just seeing the value of knowing and understanding my language, and actually now knowing that the more I know about my own language, the more the better understanding I have about the world. And because
Mm.
some of these words that we don't use as much anymore are actually connected to old stories or to um, things that used to happen back home. And so actually knowing and learning those things, and seeing that in old songs or poems, actually connects me to my homeland, and
Mm.
and a time and a context that I yearn for. Um,
Mm.
so it's kind of like, for me, that's my Hawaii. That's the place that I wish and want to go back to understand and be closer to my ancestors.
Mm. In your poetry collection, in your book, are there any poems that you've written in Tongan, or is it just, are they all in English this time around? Do you have kind of like half and half, or?
Yeah, so they're all mostly in English, and then there are some words or proverbs, or even just sentences that
Mm.
are just in Tongan, or written exactly how it was said to me. I just left it as that. And so during the editing process, the editor did her thing and then was like, here's a glossary of things that you might want to have a glossary for and
Mm.
translate. Um, and so when I started to try and put together the glossary, I was like, oh, actually, I can't, because to do that means then I have to explain the context,
Mm.
or I can't just translate it as this means that, because that's not how it works, because it also means other things in different
Mm.
contexts. And so um, I just made that decision to be bold and say, nah, no glossary. If people want to understand or learn what it is, then they need to go and search and find that. But, like, I think everything around it scaffolds you enough to be able to understand what that word means, or
Mm.
kind of the essence of what I'm talking about.
What did your family say about the book? Like, I mean, the launch just happened, but
Yeah.
when they first got their hands on the book, I mean, what was the response, even from your kids? Like, oh, I'm pretty sure everyone was pretty proud, but that must have been such a special moment to be able to.
Yeah, well, I've like had taken some like screenshots of messages from people, because I was like, what? This is crazy. But like, my sister, on that first day that I'd handed to her, one of my younger sisters, she just shared that, like, she read it back to front, and just sharing how nicely, um, how well balanced having some of that Tongan and Maori language in there was.
Mm.
But also, like, everyone's response has been different. So my sister-in-law was just really proud, saying that she's really proud that her daughter is a part of that and gets to be one of these kakala women who then gets to pass on to the next generation, that she's on the receiving end of that. So for her as a mum to see that, and understand that gift that her daughter has through
Mm.
the these poems has been really cool. And another cousin of mine had said um, that she's like, I've been in these same rooms as you, and didn't it's been nice to see what those experiences were like from your perspective, because we all look at different things. Or we just don't notice some of those really small things. And so she was just like, yeah, I think everyone has taken a different thing, but more than anything, like my cousin says, one of my other cousins who features in the book, she opens it up. She goes, I read the first page and I cried and I closed it again. But then, like most of my family because they're like, oh, I don't really read. We don't read books. That's not our thing. But how can you put this book down when you're so invested in the people that are in it? And they've just said, we laughed, we cried, we had some moments of, oh my gosh, yes, I didn't realize that. And they talk about, oh, your words are beautiful, but for me it's like, oh, you are reading, and also you are seeing some of those things or understanding some of those things that I have observed in that book, that often we don't stop and pause and look at or question, or have a laugh at. One of my cousins, because I wrote about their mum, she was like, oh my gosh, my mum's a savage. I didn't it was a funny poem, like it was a short funny poem, and she was like, oh my goodness, did she say that? Like every mum texting me saying like, I'm glad you're back home safe, even though I love you, even though sometimes you can be annoying. And she's like, oh my god, does she? I'm like, yeah. And I think that's the thing, is we all get different parts of our mothers and our aunties, and we don't all get the same version of them. And so it adds another dimension, another layer to the appreciation everyone has about those women that they're connected to, whether they're those specific people that are in the book or the own people, your own woman in your lives that you're connected to, that you've spent a lot of time with, is actually looking at them and being like, actually, do I really know you? And what are those things, those quirks, those really funny things, but also those real like things that I appreciate about you? Like my cousin was like, oh nah, because she could the title of one of the poems that are inspired by her was Thorn. And she was like, oh nah, but also, yeah, that's me. I've done those things. I am, and yes, those thorns protect you from things, but they were also the cause of your pain. So yeah, it's just real cool to like have those, like sitting down, and talking to people. And I joke when I'm like, oh, if you don't like it, just keep that to yourself. Don't worry about it. Like, but for the most part, like everyone has been real receptive, and we're excited and getting like Instagram messages from people who send photos of, this poem is my favorite one. And then yeah, so that's been real cool as well.
Tell them to write a review so that people can win, like more reviews out there. It doesn't have to be long. Then when people are searching for our Pacifica authors, for our Tongan authors and writers, reviews are there, and it just gets more traction on it. So I mean, I say all this to say I'm really really slow at writing reviews. I try. I need to do better. I
recently just I started reviewing with the sapling, which has been really cool as well. Is that actually, whilst it's another job, but it also gives me an opportunity to read, because often you don't get that time.
That's right. I remember when I was researching you, the author I did come across some reviews that, for sapling, and I thought, this is so dope. This is very cool. And like the thing with me, like in my mind when I'm reading, I'm like, yo, I'm gonna write a review after. This is exactly what I want to say. I get so invested in whatever I'm reading, and then after, it's like everything has gone out of me. I know I'm making excuses, but I'm just like, oh, now what do I want to say when I'm just the worst. I'm just not like a writer. Like I do try, but really.
We're all writers, different ways.
Before I came online, I went on TikTok, as you
Yeah.
do, and Dahlia there's a post there, and I just wanted to mention the illustrations. Fam, if you are listening, if you're tuning in, you must go and buy this book, purchase it, gift it to someone. Christmas is coming. Don't get in late. These books are going to run out. You can get it from milesbooks.com. And support Pasifika writers, support our Tongan writers. I'm telling you, fam, these illustrations, the colors, it's so vivid.
The artist is Luca. So on Instagram, his handle is Lucid Luca. And he does lots of like art around women, and has a real strong love for his mom and his nana and females in his life. And so when they said to me, hey, this is an artist that we've been thinking about for your book, sends me the Instagram, and I was like, shush, you're kidding me, because I already was following him and had a love for the work that he does. And I was like, are you serious? Because if he's keen, like, yes, absolutely, because I love his work already, but also I think it was more just I know his love of women, and not in a creepy sense, but more like his love for and honoring our women, and making sure that they're portrayed in like not just the dusky maiden way, but also like exploring what that could look like. And so I sent some pictures of like kind of what I wanted in here, and I was like, you must include all these flowers, and I also want obviously a kahua kakala in there. But and then I had the pictures of the woman, but what he did was he put the picture of the woman into like the shape of a kahua as well.
Yes,
I was
yes.
just like, oh, you're so smart and so beautiful. Like, I didn't ask for that, but I couldn't have asked for anything more. Even like I sent pictures of my mum and my aunties like ngatu and stuff, and he's pulled different motifs out of that as well and put that through the book. And in the second, like that second chapter, the cover page for that is like hands weaving, and that was literally from one of the reference pictures that I had sent through. And so what I really loved is that I've sent these references, and he's just done with it what he's like just left it up to him to use his own creative storytelling way to put those images together. Because if I chose, it would not look like this. But they're so, yeah. And I guess it was one of the other really cool things about the process is receiving the artwork back and then being like, oh, actually, can you change this, or can you add this? And with just like the lettering, the colors of all the pages and stuff, like they had the plain version, and then they had the ones that is currently now, and then they had another one that had like was playing with grays or putting different shadowing in, and being just like, oh, actually, let's strip it back because the artwork kind of really speaks for itself. But yeah, it's beautiful. I love it too.
Yeah, well, click the bio, everything that you need to know about the artists, the illustrators, also how to connect with Mele, how to buy the book. Fam, click the bio, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or whether you're watching via YouTube or Instagram. Yes, check the bio. We love to support our writers, our Pasifika authors, and just creatives on the ReadswithRosa podcast. Like, that's what I'm here for. Is uplifting, and just to give you guys your flowers. I'm just excited. I cannot wait until I can get my hands on this book in a few weeks. I cannot wait. Are you ready for your next book? Are you already like, I have ideas, I'm coming?
Well, I wasn't, because I was just like, oh sweet, that's done. I'm gonna carry on with my life. And they're like, and well, Dahlia's like, well, you need to start thinking about what your next one is. I'm
Yeah,
like,
who
oh, I
does?
don't.
No one carries on with their life, sis. What are you talking about? Cut it out.
And I was like, oh, I don't know. I wasn't too sure. And then probably the week leading um up to the launch, I'd been thinking more about doing a bilingual Tongan Māori book, but
Mm.
not. So I didn't know what that would be, and um, yeah, because my kids are Tongan Māori, and I wanted a book that they could read because they don't really read. That people laugh, or I laugh because when I take them to like violin lessons or
Mm.
these places, and they're like putting words up, and they're all things that are written in English, obviously, and so they're like, oh yeah, so where is the letter, some random letter that doesn't exist in the Maori alphabet, and they're like, oh, so where's the D? Show me where the D is. And they're just like looking around. I'm like, oh, my kids can't read in English. And they're like, what? Because they're 6 and 7, and
Mm.
you'd expect that they can at least read. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, they read Maori or Tongan. So
Mm.
some of those letters don't exist in our alphabet. Um, but you just tell them the shape, you tell them where the thing is, they can understand that. And so often I find myself like, because some of the tutors are like, oh, you're so hands-on, that's so good. And I'm just like, no, I'm here to help you because I need to translate. I need to translate to my kids in Tongan or
Right.
Māori
Mm.
because they don't always understand when you're telling them in English.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
That's
but
so cool, man. I love that. Do your kids, are they in a, where do they learn both languages? Are they in a, like a language unit, or they learn language, is it language learning through school, through the home, through community classes? Like, how do you, yeah, how do they learn both
yeah.
languages?
So obviously, I'm Tongan, and
Mm.
our family um, speak predominantly Tongan.
Mm.
And actually, I often have to remind them like, you can speak to the kids in Tongan. You don't have to speak to them Balangi.
Mm.
Um, But for me, because I've been so immersed in like growing up in a world that is just Tongan, I wanted them to have the opportunity to also learn a Maori, because when they were born, my husband had been around my family so much that he was speaking to them in Tongan as well, because
I see.
like my family are just so unapologetic. They just
Mm.
speak to him in Tongan and expect him to figure out like
Yeah.
what it is that they're asking of him. Um, and so I wanted them to also have the opportunity to be immersed in and learn their culture as well, and their Maori language. So we put them all into kohanga reo, and then
Mm.
they're now at a kura kaupapa Māori at Te Awa Whānui. Um, so we laugh because they're so fobby in both, like they're fobby Māori and also fobby Tongan, and then like English isn't that great either. So it's just been really cool to see and funny. Um, like when my oldest son, he was probably about 3 years old and wasn't really like speaking in full sentences, well, not in English any, or not really like saying words, and so and I'm like, oh, some of the words he's actually saying Tongan or they're Maori, but because at that point they were in, it was before they went into kohanga, so they were
Mm.
in early childhood, and um, we are just like having concerns that he was slow or behind because he couldn't communicate in English or say words or sentences, and so then we were getting this speech therapist to come and do an assessment on him because we were worried, like, why is my son not speaking or at the same level as everybody else? And then literally that week, he's just full on like sentences, skip the broken
Mm.
sentences, and he was just like speaking full words and stuff. And so um we're talking with the teachers and with the speech therapist, and they're like, oh, he's just got like he's processing 3 different
Yeah.
languages. So
It's just the different languages, like, how does he respond, right?
yeah, and so then like he's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so after being at the hikoi today,
Mm.
with my kids, probably I'm hoping to put something together with my kids from their perspective about their experience of the hikoi and being able to capture, like, I guess, a historical moment from the perspective of a Māori Tongan kid.
Mm.
So then I can put their name on and then see you later. Nudge.
I love that. Yes, I'm. Whatever you decide. The next book, Gemmas. We are here for it. We love to see it. We need that. Like, we need more books, and I love Tonga and Maori. Like, that's different, but we need it. It shouldn't
Yeah.
be different. It should be normalized. So I say that
And
to say it should be normalized, right?
yeah, because a lot of the well, with the work that I do, I look at stats because I want to understand the people that I'm
Mm,
working with. But what we're finding is, like, more and more of our Pacific communities also identify as Maori, and so
mm,
you can't say that, like, they're just this or they're just that. They're Maori and they're Pacific, or they're
mm,
Maori and they're Palangi, or we're they're Samoan and they're Tongan. We have lots of
mm,
mixed heritage, like, babies, and we want to have something that reflects them. If we're talking about being truly reflective, it's not just
mm,
about having a Tongan book, having a Maori book, having a Niuean book to be able to access. It's being able to find ways that you have all of those things that make, so that you don't have to buy two different
mm,
books for one kid. You can buy the one, and they see themselves reflected in more than one way, and more than
mm.
just the language.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Do you have any book recommendations?
Yes. So, obviously, because I do lots of random things, like
Mm,
reading for fun, reading for leisure isn't a thing. Like, it's hard because you're often, like, stuck in, like, reading for work, that you
mm,
just get to a point where you're like, I'm not going to read, I'm going to scroll. But
mm,
um, I'd been part of a workshop in the community. Shout out to Vinepa Trust, but we were doing, like, poetry in the tapa. So we were making these tapa pieces and writing poetry to go with that.
mm.
And then at the end of it, they gifted us poetry books, which is good. It was really
Mm.
fitting because I don't often read poetry books, which is funny because I've just put one out. But it was a reminder of that, that love that I have for, like, reading other people's poetry, um, in a collection, and not just I came by this one poem or this one stanza and I'm gonna put that on social media, but more
Mm,
just for reflecting. And so one of them is Kalamila's Goddess Muscle.
mm.
Oh, dang it.
Nice,
Um,
nice. Yep,
yeah,
good, good, good.
it's so, like, this one's taken me a little bit longer, but it's really cool as well because looking at different, I guess, understanding all the different things that make you unique, make you strong, but also, some hard stuff in there as well that I've had to take a while to process. And, like, there's a really cool poem in here for Teresia, as well, the late
Mm,
Teresia Te Awa. But this one was really cool because, like, sitting on the train this morning, reading that with the kids while we were on our way into the hikoi, but just taking some time to, I guess, unplug and exercise the brain in a different way, and with someone else's experience, which has been
mm.
really cool as well. Because again, so busy doing nothing. But the other thing is pollination. There.
Okay,
Oh.
nice.
Anyways, pollination by Whawhitata Ase, is really cool as well. And that's, like, what I love about this book is, like, the cool little they're just simple like pictures in black, but also like this is a Samoan writer, but I look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's really cool, or oh yeah, I see that in my life as well, or I never thought of that, and just having that reminder of the connectedness that we have across the Pacific by reading other people's experiences and saying like, oh, I'm not the only one that has a yearning for connection through languages, and but also the understanding that we again are natural orators. That is part of our DNA, and we're storytellers by nature, but how we do it is all different. And so yeah, like having these different books to look at and read and mull over has been really cool as well to look, yeah, to read through. But then I also just received, which I'm going to be doing a review on soon, The Paradise Generation, which is by Sana Thompson. Yeah, the sapling had reached out. They're like, oh, we see that you've done some picture book reviews, but how would you feel about doing a young adults book review? I'm like, please send it to me. Yeah, so
Cool.
it's cool being given homework, I guess, or work to do, because it forces me to read, but I love reading anyway. So it means that I can put it into my calendar as work, and my brain doesn't feel like I'm like blocking out the world from the things that I need to do. You just get lost in it. I remember just as a kid, or even actually as a young adult, missing some things because I had to, like, I couldn't put the book down. Like Sam Walker's book, reading that during summer, and like you're at the beach and everyone's like playing volleyball behind you and other people are down like in the water, and I had to finish it before I could carry on with my life.
Riz, I understand. You do not even have to justify that. I totally get it. I am that person. I'm like, I'm not judging you. Oh, ouch. This sounds like me. Okay. This is a question. Just before we wrap up, self-care. I ask all the guests that come through. Some find the question very challenging because self-care is quite difficult, especially parents who have come on the show as well. So, yes, sis, like self-care, what does that even look like for you? Do you have time to take care of yourself?
Yeah, that is a difficult one. Because some of the things that I find as self-care, other people see as work. But I think what I'm finding more joy in is putting my laptop away and sleeping, because honestly, sometimes I would be like up early and late, and then like the hours of sleep were just not good for anyone. But really taking the time to just feel okay about, okay, well, I'm not doing that. But I'm also part of a Pacific Connection, which is a choir, and I joined that because I needed something for myself that wasn't connected to my, I guess, immediate community, my family, my church, all of those things, because we end up in a space of service. But I wanted something that was creative just for me and that filled my cup as well. And so I've always had like love for music, and so I joined the choir. And so like Sunday nights are my time where I'm like, cool, I'm going to rehearsal, but actually it's also time to just like take care of myself and just be by myself without it being a job or it being connected to my family. Otherwise, like, I really just love anything, just hanging out with my kids, taking the time to I guess make those memories. I grew up with a single mum, and so she was often at work, or we were so we were like with my aunties and everyone else. But one of the things that I often look back at and I feel real sad about is we didn't get a lot of time making memories with my mum. A lot of the trips that we went on, or some of those really cool milestone activities that we did with wider family. And, not taking away from my mum, because she did what she needed to do to get us through. That's made me really appreciate the time that I have now, because I have my husband here, and I don't have to be working 3-4 jobs just to get by. I have an opportunity, and so for me is really treasuring that time of, if the kids are asking me, can we go for a walk? Yeah, let's go. And so every time there's an opportunity to go and hang out with my kids, or just sit and be in the same space, I'm there. That's me just living and being like, wow, how good that I get this opportunities to just be in a space with my kids. And even though they drive me up the wall, I they drive me absolutely insane. But I wouldn't have it any other way. They're a blessing. And these moments that I get to share with them, or share with them and my mum, those are things that I can never put a price tag on, and I would always choose over work.
That's beautiful. To be honest, I feel like ask 10 more questions, Rosa. Ask 10 more questions so she doesn't have to go to sleep. You can talk and talk and talk. I feel like I'm like enjoying this. I feel like we could talanoa forever. This has been amazing. This is a part of the show where I'm just going to wrap it up and kind of hand it back to you. But before I hand it back to you to kind of wrap up the show and finish us off with some wisdom, I just have to say thank you, Mele. Honestly, I feel like we know each other. We go way back in the short time that we've been online. It's just been such an honor. It's been a blessing just to have you here, sharing just a bit of your journey as an author, now published author. Whoop, whoop. I love to see it. I'm excited for what is to come, whatever that looks and sounds like in the literary world. I wait with excitement, and I cannot wait to put you on blast again whenever that next book gem drops. But yeah, I just encourage you just to keep doing what you do, keep loving on your family. Yeah, I know that there are many, many, many more stories that have not been told, and I cannot wait for Mele Tonga-Grant part 2. That might have to be another podcast, by the way. Just saying, we're going to manifest that. But thank you, sis, for coming through. Wishing you and your family lots of alofa and just blessings and safe holidays. I know this is a bit dramatic because it is only November 19, but Christmas is going to sneak up on us before you know it, and it'll be like, Happy New Year. Okay, that is dramatic. Anyways, and for anyone tuning in, if you are listening, once again, check the bio, support the sis Mele, support our Tongan author and storyteller, Mele Tonga-Grant. Her book gem is out there, melesbooks.com. Check all the info in the bio. Follow her on Instagram. Follow the illustrators. Just these amazing people, the team that she worked with just to put this book, beautiful poetry collection out there. I am now going to zip it because honestly, guys, it is currently after midnight in New Zealand. It's only 8:14 here in Japan. But I am going to just pass it back over to you, Mele, just to wrap up the podcast, wrap up our talanoa with some wisdom or a quote, some inspiration, sis.
Oh, thank you so much. I find it hard when they're like, oh, share some words of wisdom, because you're like, But I think one of the things is I really wanted to thank you for reaching out, as soon as you heard that this book was coming out, and reaching out to do this talanoa, to be on the podcast, because I think it's one of those things that whilst we're all telling the stories, you also need the cheerleaders, the ones who continue to celebrate you and share your story, because otherwise it just sits on the shelf and those aren't shared. And so thank you for using your platform to, I guess, elevate the voices of Pacific in another way through talanoa, through getting to know the people behind the stories that are told. I guess is just as important as the stories that are being told, because it captures another, I guess, another dimension of who we are. And so thank you so much for the space that you're creating, the platform that you have, that more writers, more creatives, more storytellers are able to connect across the ocean. Like, you're all the way in Japan, and here you are, still looking back home, and finding ways to connect with Pacific people abroad. And so thank you for your platform. And, just encouragement to anyone that's out there in whatever you are doing, like, just do it with your whole self, because if you're going out there wholeheartedly, like, there's nothing but goodness that's going to come out of the things that you do. And whatever it is that you're passionate about, whether it's storytelling or in your work, whatever it is, serving, that's going to touch someone else's life and probably be a pinnacle moment of a life-changing decision that someone might make, because they're inspired by you, because you've encouraged them, because you've taken the time to pause and serve them or acknowledge the things that they're doing as well. So honestly, continue to share our stories, continue to celebrate each other, because if we're not celebrating each other, then who will? And God's given us these tools, these mechanisms to be able to go out into this world and just be amazing. Like, being within the crowd today at the hikoi was a testament of people's want and need for connectedness, especially seeing all of our Pacific brothers and sisters out there walking in solidarity with te iwi Māori has been just a beautiful thing. And so I guess it's one of those things of reminding ourselves of, like, we all want the ability to have tino rangatiratanga over ourselves, but actually, just as importantly, over our stories. And so take that pen, write that story, or put it into a podcast, because again, if you're not writing your stories, it will be written for you. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.